Green Idyll is in Burkina Faso, where Mathieu first began his work 30 years ago. It's proof that it is possible to regreen the Sahel. And that's important in the fight against climate change. Forests, farmland and soil are vital for soaking up or sequestering excess carbon in the atmosphere. Mathieu was born and raised here in the small town of Goussy. He started his working life on the land. Today Mathieu is on a journey that will take him through the Sahel from Burkina Faso to Mali, across some of the harshest landscapes known to man. Here, life expectancy is only 45 years. Mathieu is highly respected but modest. He manages to stop a colleague bowing to him in greeting. Now 56, he's the kind of man who can talk to anyone. And he's become the region's leading expert at re-greening. Sophie Soren is a young field worker who'll travel to Dori with him. Here they'll set up a new program to re-green the surrounding desert. 30 years ago it seemed there was no such hope of change. A series of severe droughts across the Sahel devastated the land. A third of the population fled to escape the lack of rainfall. The farmers remember it only too well.
Yes, the drought was a horrible experience. Many people died and many animals also. Most people from the village left for the Ivory Coast and other places.
It was back in the 1980s, during that drought, that Mathieu began working for a British charity and began to study old techniques that would help the farmers.
Oui, j'ai travaillé, j'ai eu à l'époque pendant que je travaillais pour Oxfam UK.
In those days I was working with Oxfam UK and we used traditional techniques to conserve the water. When I worked closely with the farmers in the fields, I realized that this was much more satisfying work, as they were really taking note of what we were doing, and together we made a great team to renew the land.
Et les paysans ont adopté facilement la technologie qu'on a promis ensemble.
The first stop on the road is his Green Idyll, Ranawa. It's a village that almost died. In a 10-year period from 1975 to 85, the village lost a quarter of its population. Their wells were drying up, their land became desert. The villagers were so destitute that only 2 families had any livestock. Now, thanks to trees, that's changed. Mathieu shows the farmers photographs taken by the US Geological Survey over a 40-year period. They tell the story of soil depletion during the drought years and the return of vegetation since the tree planting program.
It's amazing. At the same time, you can see a real growth in the vegetation. Look at this, where we've improved the number of trees. Just look at the difference in this, and then this photo. Every tree helps to enrich the environment.
In 1968, there are few trees, and the tree cover is poor. By 2002, there's a marked change. The old trees are flourishing, new trees have emerged, villagers have returned, and agriculture is doing better than ever. Mathieu organises farmers at a training workshop in Ranawa to further the regreening of the Sahel. It's a key activity. This is how farmers learn from each other.
If we learn good practices here, well, this is our best way out of poverty.
The techniques used are simple but effective. One such practice is the diguettes, low, dry stone walls to retain water and stop rainfall runoff.
Working with stone lines is helpful because if the land is bare, the rainwater runs off and carries away the good soil and seeds we've planted. By planting new trees, when they grow, it helps stabilise the soil.
Creating a diguette is back-breaking work. The farmers dig rocks out of the sun-baked ground and then break them down. They'll then have to move the rocks 400 metres to the fields, impossible without a truck. But the truck costs $100 to hire, a huge sum for people living on $1 a day. Today, Mathieu's training organisation comes to the rescue and pays for the truck.
This is a traditional method we've adapted, and it consists of measuring the levels. The technique of piling stones to make stone barriers has existed for millennia, but this adapted technique is primarily from Burkina Faso.
The farmers have refined the old technique by charting a level line across the face of the slope, then placing the stones to make a barrier at an even height along the length of the field.
We've had stone lines like this since 1985. We built 15 hectares in the first year. Thanks to these lines, there are no more problems with flooding in the village. So all the rain that falls on the village stays within the lines. It stays there to feed all the plants. It's like a miracle.
Once the fields are stabilised by the diguettes, the farmers use a different technique to protect the growth of their crop seedlings. They'll make a half moon. It's cut from the hard soil and filled with manure and vegetation, allowing water to be retained long enough to encourage new growth. It helps to protect the crops and soil from being blown away in the dry season. Again, it's a simple, effective technique. But in 50-degree heat, only 2 half moons can be dug a day. Zai, another ancient technique that Mathieu likes, is easier. Small holes are dug and filled with dung and seeds. The microorganisms within the dung create the best environment for the seeds in this harsh, dry soil until the rains come. Next stop on Mathieu's journey is Bogoya. In the 1980s drought, farmer Oseni Kindu had lost everything and fled to the Ivory Coast.
There was nothing left growing here during the drought, and look at the massive regrowth everywhere.
When Oseni returned to his farm in Bogoya, he enthusiastically adopted Mathieu's ideas, and they've paid off.
It was very hard at the beginning when I started constructing the stone lines over 25 years ago. When I came here, there was only one baobab tree, but now I have about 250 baobab trees. I've regreened this whole area. In all, it's 3.5 hectares of trees and vegetation. I've had to make it work as there's about 20 people in my family who rely on me. I've been able to inspire others to experiment with different methods. And I've inspired people in my village to do the same. Even if it doesn't rain much, the little water retained is enough to grow things.
Next stop for Mathieu and Sophie is the northern town of Dori. Here they face different problems, for this is an area dominated by herdsmen raising animals rather than farmers. On the way to Dori, Mathieu and Sophie meet a Tuareg family of herdsmen fleeing from Mali with their animals. Sophie immediately sets to work helping grind the millet.
We've been on the road for weeks now and hope to settle nearby in a village as there's no water here. There was too much conflict in our region of Mali between the Tuareg and the government. My family would have suffered, so we came here with our animals.
Herdsmen, like the wandering Tuareg, own no land or trees, so they have few rights in the Sahel. They depend entirely on their animals for their prosperity. In Dori, Mathieu confronts the same conditions he faced in Runawa 30 years ago. And he believes regreening is possible here too. This time it's Sophie who'll do the work. But first there's a pep talk from Mathieu on how to change people's ways.
Alors donc tout ça Comme c'est une zone à forte vocation pastorale,
you know that there is a strong pastoral tradition here.
L'alimentation des bétails. Donc ça c'est un problème fondamental qui en tout cas
The major problem for the population here is feeding themselves, which weighs so heavily on the farmer. So the disappearance of bushes and trees poses a huge problem.
Un arbustif ou un arboré ou un herbacé pose un problème. Et le second problème également, c'est l'ensablement des cours d'eau. Ce qui fait que bon,
there are too many mouths to feed. The project is not so much about investing much money, but about thinking strategically. You have to convince people. If they see change is possible, then you're halfway there.
Mathieu is leaving Burkina Faso, travelling north to Mali to see what lessons can be learned here. Mali too suffered during the droughts of the 70s and 80s. A third of the population, some 2 million people, were severely affected. Their herds were decimated. Conditions today are still severe. Large sand dunes almost suffocate the old trees. Wherever regreening has been practiced since the 1980s, thousands of hectares have been reclaimed. In the village of Ende, the farmers are now much more careful tending their trees, integrating them with their crops. The trees provide fruit, timber and firewood. Their leaves help restore soil fertility. Mathieu meets Salif Gwindo, president of the Barhogan Association. It's an organisation of over 30 communes in the area of Bankas.
What advice about tree management can I take back to the farmers of Burkina?
There are the benefits with the animals. Even the villagers realize this now. In the past, people used to collect dung and even millet stalks for fuel, but now that they have wood from trees, they don't need to do that. Natural seed regeneration is helped by the animals passing seeds in their manure, and this increases production because of all the nutrients put back.
Under the millet stalks left in the fields, microorganisms and termites help improve soil quality.
In Burkina, for example, the women use this as firewood, but if you leave it, it's fertilizer.
But there's little point in a farmer fertilizing trees and the crops beneath them if he has no control over those trees.
C'est parce que le paysan protégeait déjà ces espèces que l'État les a protégées.
I think we have a right to protect the land. And then there's the policies of the different ministries who offer advice. But they need to coordinate more with the farmers as well.
Nous sommes un peu plus modérés parce qu'il y a la stratégie politique d'élaboration de plans de gestion forestière.
There's a political strategy, a plan of action for the region handed down by the government. But at the same time, they also have to recognize that the village is our space. We must be allowed to manage our own forests.
Voici notre règlement en vigueur pour gérer notre forêt.
This is perhaps the most important change in the regreening of Mali, the focus on who owns the trees. There was a time when woodcutters could roam freely, felling any trees they liked. But in the 1990s, the law changed. Farmers now owned the trees growing on their land. Woodcutters could no longer fell them. An organisation called Sahel Echo established a local radio station in Bankas which publicised the new law. Mary Allen, a British regreening expert, came to Mali to help in the middle of the 1980s drought. She's been here ever since.
It was when the Barhogan Association was given training on what the law said that they realised that they didn't have any forest land. They had trees, but they were in their fields.
So, for the first time, the farmers gained control of the trees on their land.
They introduced new rules for themselves. So they introduced rules about how you can't go into somebody else's field and cut his tree without asking his permission. They said that the women couldn't cut trees, that they could collect what the men trimmed off the trees at the beginning of the rainy season. And then they started to train and inform the farmers in the new techniques of how you could prune trees and how you could keep them on your fields without reducing your millet harvest.
Caring for the trees is better for us. My wife is happy and we have plenty to cook with.
I get more firewood this way, and it's not a problem. And I don't have to walk far to get it. The dried leaves act as fertilizer for the soil, and we no longer have to burn dried millet stalks.
Later in the village, the farmer's wife explains that not everybody follows this practice.
Some women come and try to steal from our woodpile because we're so successful.
A woman will tell her husband she's been hard done by because she has to collect twigs or millet stalks.
Even among the women she'll feel humiliated because she's got a lazy husband.
5 miles away in Bancasse, Mathieu is guest on the local radio station, Radio Seno.
We're here tonight to listen to each other and share ideas about how we can help our farmers and their families.
It's not the first time I've been here, and I want to congratulate the association, which has made great progress in the villages creating trees on farms. Why do the other villages work differently from the farmers of the association? They need to do the same and make family forests. You should invite all the other villages around Bancasse who haven't joined us, so they too can create the family forests. Why are all the villages around here not joining you? I think we have to be brave and continue our collaboration and share our experiences.
For the rest of the world, there's an added benefit to the regreening of the Sahel. Not only do people live better lives, but their trees and topsoil capture carbon. Mathieu returns to Ouagadougou, where there's a young Burkinabe scientist trying to help these farmers by searching for the best drought-resistant trees. Ori Buda works for a tree research organisation, the Centre for International Forestry Research, CIFOR.
In this nursery, I'm trying to stress plants to see how level they can resist about drought stress and how they adapt in drought stress to drought stress. And after 2 years, I may say that trees from southern part of Africa resist less to drought stress compared to trees from Sahelian part of Africa. Trees are, to me, the natural best way to capture carbon.
Millions of hectares need regreening. Under the Kyoto Climate Treaty, carbon capture is an integral part of the Clean Development Mechanism, or CDM, whereby governments give cash to projects in the developing world to plant trees. Chris Rage is an environmental scientist working as a specialist on the problems of desertification in the Sahel. He's in London talking to a charity funding the Sahel Regreening Initiative. Large areas have already been regreened in the Sahel. In Niger, for example, 5 million hectares. And it costs very little. $2 to $3 million per country would produce remarkable results. But will African farmers benefit from this carbon capture scheme?
Compared to tropical rainforests, the carbon capture in these dry lands is a little bit of a drop in the ocean. And farmers never think about protecting and managing trees for the reasons of capturing carbon. That's a notion that is completely unknown to them.
The CDM only provides finance for the planting of new forests, not for the maintenance and pruning of existing ones.
In this carbon market, Africa has only 2% of this market, compared to 80% for China and India. And to make this market more profitable to Africa is to take into account other activities that we are doing to maintain our environmental condition in a very good conditions, like our rural people are doing. But CDM don't take such things into account.
No, I don't think these farmers have any responsibility to plant and look after their trees in terms of climate change. They're doing it to survive in what is already a very harsh and uncertain climate, and the man-made climate change is coming from our consumption in the West.
Mathieu has travelled across Burkina Faso into Mali and back again. So, does he still believe that the efforts of the farmers will transform the fortunes of this region?
Alors, donc j'ai vu ici une population déterminée à défendre contre l'adversité de la nature.
What I've seen here is a determined population fighting against natural adversity and suffering in every sense. The people are so enthusiastic about all the new production and agricultural techniques. Thanks to their hard work, I am confident they can reverse the situation.
Aujourd'hui, renverser la situation. Donc pour moi, ils ont reverdi.
A great area is being regreened. I am really impressed with all that I have seen, and if everyone had the same enthusiasm, we would have a brighter future, and the Sahel would be green again.
La même dynamique, nous avons l'espoir qu'effectivement on pourra reverdir le Sahel.
CCTV News is an English-language news channel, broadcasting 24 hours a day to a global audience. As the sole advertising agent for the channel, CTV Golden Bridge uses its professional expertise to connect Chinese enterprises with millions of viewers around the world.
Climate change, recognizing our own culpability, we're now pursuing a new green lifestyle. Organic cotton garments, products made from recycled materials, and eco-vehicles. These are all becoming part of our daily lives. The more we think about a fragile environment in which we live, the more we realize just how important it is to lead a green lifestyle.
Much of the clothing we wear is made of cotton. Most cotton farmers use polluting chemicals. Cotton farms take up just 2.5% of the world's farmland, but use 10% of all pesticides and 22% of all insecticides produced annually, according to the British government. This can have an impact on people's health. According to the World Health Organization, 20,000 people die every year from pesticide poisoning. But here in Gujarat in northwest India, some farmers are turning away from chemicals and switching to organic cotton production. According to the Gujarati government, 5,000 of the more than 100,000 cotton farmers here are now growing organic cotton. In part, they switch because of health concerns, but they also get a guaranteed minimum price for their cotton when prices are down. It takes 3 years of farming without chemicals before a farm is declared organic. The question is, what are the advantages to the farmer of moving to organic production? The yields from organic cotton farming match those of conventional cotton production when harvests are good, according to a recent study. In leaner times, organic farmers tend to produce more. At first, the input costs to organic farmers are comparable to non-organic cotton, though they drop over time. Prices too are similar, although organic farmers are guaranteed a minimum of 21 rupees per hectare, even if cotton market prices drop to as little as 18 rupees per hectare. In the UK alone, 2 million tonnes of new shoes and clothing is bought every year, and according to the British government, about the same amount is thrown away. It's the fastest growing source of waste in British households. It's either destroyed in huge incinerators causing pollution or buried in landfill sites. Textiles present a particular problem for landfill because the synthetic man-made fibres don't decompose. One company pioneering industrial-scale recycling is Patagonia. In the early 90s, the California-based company took discarded plastic soda bottles, melted them down, and turned them into new, high-quality fleeces for snow skiing. A fleece made from old bottles can be recycled indefinitely, and any brand of fleece will do. Patagonia is now expanding its scheme with a new program called Common Threads. Here, shops not only sell new clothes, they receive old clothes as well in their recycling bins.
Yes, that's 100%.
The clothes from Patagonia's recycling bins are shipped here to a reprocessing plant in Japan. The old fleeces are melted down into pellets, from which the new polyester yarn is woven into new clothes and other products. Polyester is derived from oil and makes up nearly half of all textiles in the world. So recycling polyester means there is less demand on petroleum, thereby reducing carbon dioxide emissions and energy consumption. For the whole world's clothing industry to be sustainable, rather than a small part being eco-chic, there is still a long way to go. To satisfy the soaring demand for organic cotton, there would need to be a seismic shift of thousands of farmers towards more environmentally friendly methods. For the Gujarat region of India, the prospect of prosperity through a booming organic cotton trade is a major boost to the rural communities. And for Keema and his family, green fashion could ensure a brighter future.